Okay, in this video we're looking at solving harder quadratics, and what we'll do is, you've got 4 quadratics on the board there, on the screen, sorry. I'm going to go through the first 2 quadratics in this video, and then the questions 3 and 4 in the second video, okay? And I'll go through each question individually on its own screen, and I'll put the answer back on to the screen at the end, okay? So that's the way that we're going to do that. So question 1 says, solve the quadratic. Now, this thing here is a quadratic. You've got a square term, and it's a more difficult one because you've got a coefficient bigger than 1 before the x squared part. Now, to solve this, you want to go and factorize this here. You want to go and put this into a pair of double brackets, okay? And then you want to go and put it equal to 0. So really, right, if you've watched my videos on factorizing harder quadratics, this is kind of just building on from that. So first of all, numbers that multiply to make 3 times by 2. So 3 times 2 gives you 6, and then you want numbers that are going to add to make the middle term in the quadratic, which is a positive 7. So 7 can go there. Now your numbers here are going to be 6 and 1, because 6 times 1 gives you 6, and 6 add 1 gives you 7. And it's really important that we get this bit correct. Like, for example, if you went and tried 3 and 2, well, 3 times 2 does give you 6, but 3 add 2 gives you 5 and not 7, so they would be incorrect. Okay, so 6 and 1 are the numbers that you want here. And then from here, on a video on factorizing, you go to your grid and you put your first term in the top left corner, so 3x squared goes up here. Your last number, the 2, goes in the bottom right corner, and then these numbers 6 and 1 can go anywhere in your grid, but remember to add an x to them. So 1 we just go and write as x. Now you want to go and factorize this, and it's going to be better to factorize it horizontally because you can take out a 3 from 3 and 6, and that's going to work out nicely. So let's go and do that. So you can take out a 3 here, and you can also go and take out an x, because 3x goes into 3x squared and 6x. Now 3x times by x gives you 3x squared, and 3x times by 2 gives you 6x. And an x times by 1 gives you 1x, and hopefully 1 times 2, it does give you 2. If that has completely bamboozled you, then go back a few videos and watch my videos on factorizing harder quadratics, and this should make sense. Now in your brackets, you can have these parts here. So in any order, I'm going to go for x plus 2 to begin with, and I've got 3x plus 1 over here. So all I've done is I've written this quadratic here into factorized form. They mean the same thing, but it's in brackets now. And importantly, I put it equal to 0. Now, when you solve this, on the previous video, we saw that you just go and put each of the brackets equal to 0. So let's go and do that up here. So we've got a little bit more room. So the first one, we've got x plus 2, and we're going to be putting it equal to 0. And then the second one, you've got 3x plus 1, we're putting that equal to 0 also. And you go and solve these one-step and these two-step equations. So the first one, you've got x plus 2. You want to get rid of that plus 2 by doing the inverse, by taking away 2 from both sides, because then they cancel. And you're left over with x being equal to 0 take away 2, which is negative 2. And that is your first solution of the equation. And then the second equation, you've got 3x plus 1 equals to 0. Let's get rid of that plus 1 by taking away 1 and doing it from both sides, because then they cancel. And you get 3x being equal to 0 take away 1, which is negative 1. You've got 3 times x, opposite of timesing by 3 is to divide by 3, and we can do it on both sides. The 3's are going to cancel, and you're left over with x being equal to minus 1 over 3 as your second solution. Now you could write it as a decimal if you want to. You could write it as negative 0.3 recurring, but I prefer to leave things as fractions because they are easier to work with. So a few things, because these are the answers, but what does it really mean? Well, first of all, you can check that your solutions are correct. For example, if I put x equals to minus 2 into my equation, it should be equal to 0. And let's just check it. So you've got 3 times your x squared value. So you've got 3. If your x value is minus 2 in this case, and you're squaring it, you're then adding on 7 times your x value, which is minus 2. And then you're adding on 2 on the end. And if you put this, and if you look at this, it should be equal to 0. So minus 2 squared gives you positive 4. 3 times 4 gives you 12. 7 times by negative 2 gives you minus 14. And then if you go and add 2, hopefully that equals to 0. 12 add 2 is 14. Take away 14, it gives you 0. So your solutions, and it's the same with minus 1 over 3, if you put it back into the quadratic, it should be equal to 0, because that's what you're doing when you're solving this, okay? Now, in context, what are you actually doing when you solve a quadratic? Now, this is more like grade 8 stuff, but I'll go into it a little bit because it's going to be useful anyway. And if I show you what we're really doing here, if I go and draw a bit of a graph over here, For some reason, if I write on the screen up here, it minimizes the whole screen, which is a little bit annoying, but we'll make do with it. So here I've got an xy axis, so x, and I've got y. Now a quadratic is going to take a U kind of shape, and in this one it's going to be something like this, something that looks a little bit like that. Okay, very wavy, but hopefully you kind of get the rough idea. Now your two solutions, x being -2, so for example this one over here, and x being -1/3, is where your quadratic, it cuts through the x-axis. You can see the x-axis, and you've got x solutions, -2 and -1/3. So as a rough sketch, you can see the quadratic, it passes through the x-axis, okay, this one at the points -2 and -1/3. That is what you're doing when you're solving this quadratic, okay? But anyway, in this video, we're just concerned with getting these solutions, which are -2 and -1/3, and that's going to put them into our answers box. So x being equal to -2 is the first one. Let's do it in red. X is -2, and you've got x being equal to -1/3. These are your two solutions. Also, just note, right, with solving a quadratic, there could be the case, right, that if you solve a quadratic, there can either be two solutions, okay, like the one we've just seen, where it cuts through the x-axis at 2 points. There could be the case where you solve a quadratic and it cuts through the x-axis at 1 point, like this, so there'll only be one solution. And you could also have the case where your quadratic, it doesn't cut through the x-axis at all, and there would be 0 solutions. But in these videos, we're looking at the first case, okay? Look, I'm really getting into kind of a lot of more detail than probably what you need for the time being here, but it's good to start linking the ideas together between topics. Okay. Question 2, solve the following quadratic, begin by factorising. So numbers that are going to multiply to do 2 times 15, which is going to give you 30, and numbers that add to give you the middle number, which is -13. So there we go. And your numbers here are actually going to be -10 and -3. And let's just double check this part is correct. This is very important. If you go and do -10 and you multiply it by -3, you get +30, which is what you want. And if you go and do -10, and you add -3, or you just do -10 take away 3, you do get -13. So it is correct. It's really important that you're careful with your signs here. Now we know to go and drop our grid. Let's go and do that to help us factorise this with your top left number going in the top left, 2x squared, and you've got the 15 in the bottom right, and then your two numbers here, -10 and -3, they can go anywhere in the grid. It doesn't matter. Now again, if you went to factorise this way, tricky because you've got 2 and -3, a little bit awkward, but this way you can factorise easily because you can go and take out a 2 from 2 and 10, and you can take out an x from x squared and x. Now 2x times by x gives you 2x squared, and 2x times by -5 gives you -10x, and an x times by -3 gives you -3x, and hopefully -3 times -5 gives you +15, so looking good. Now your two brackets are going to be the following. So x take away 5 is the first one, and it can go in any bracket, doesn't matter. And then you've got 2x take away 3 is your second bracket, and of course you've got to go and put it equal to 0. I've just replaced this with the factorised form, which is down here, okay? And then from here you go and solve your two linear equations you get from this, which are going to be x take away 5, and you get 2x take away 3, and that's going to write these up here. So we've got x take away 5 being equal to 0, and you've got 2x take away 3 also being equal to 0. Get rid of that -5 by adding 5, the inverse to both sides, because then they cancel, which is good, and you get x being equal to 0 plus 5, which gives you 5, is your first solution to the quadratic. And then your second solution, we go and work through the second equation. We can go and add 3 to both sides here, add 3, they cancel. So 2x is going to be equal to 0 plus 3, which gives you 3, timesing by 2, inverse is to divide by 2, divide by 2 both sides, and you're left over with x being equal to 3/2, or you could write it as a decimal as 1.5, but I would always leave it as a fraction because I think they are easier to work with. And they're your solutions. And again, what you can do is you can put those into your quadratic to check it makes sense. Let's just do it with the first one, x being equal to 5. You're going to be getting 2 times by x squared, so times by 5 squared, take away 13 times by 5, so take away 13, timesing it through by 5, and adding 15, and hopefully it equals to 0. 5 squared is 25, times it by 2 is 50, 13 times by 5, and its negative is going to be -65, and you're adding on 15, which indeed gives you 0, because 50 is 15 gives you 65. Take away 65 does indeed give you 0. So it makes sense, okay? And again, just to give you a little bit of context, if you were to graph or to sketch this roughly, okay, we go and draw our axis. Your solutions are at x being equal to 5, so somewhere going to be over here on x, and 3 over 2 is 1.5, somewhere over here. Your quadratic, it cuts through those two x values. So that's a really rough sketch of what is going on, okay? And they are your solutions, 5 and 3 over 2. So there we go, x is equal to 5 and x is equal to 3 over 2. And they are your solutions for question number 2, okay? And in the next video, we'll look at question 3 and we'll look at question 4. Okay, thank you for watching.